I'm not getting on that plane. I'm going to her.
You're choosing her? Right here?
The day Daniel tore my ticket in half at gate 14 was the day I finally understood that the trip had never been about the trip. I'm Renee. I was 34 years old, standing in the middle of Hartwell International Airport with my suitcase handle still warm from my palm, watching my husband of 9 years rip a boarding pass down the center like it was a coupon he'd changed his mind about. The sound it made, that dry, papery snap, is the kind of sound that doesn't leave you. I still hear it sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and I let myself remember, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how we got to that gate. Daniel and I met at a wedding neither of us wanted to attend. His cousin marrying a woman his family didn't approve of. My college roommate marrying a man I privately thought was beneath her. We ended up at the same sad table near the kitchen doors, the one nobody wants. And somewhere between the dry chicken and the terrible best man toast, we started laughing at the same things. That was Daniel's gift back then. He could make anything funny. He could make you feel like the only interesting person in a room full of people. I fell for that laugh before I fell for him. It took years to understand the difference. We got married 2 years later in a small ceremony my mother paid for because Daniel said he wanted to put the money into our future instead of one day. I believed him. I believed a lot of things Daniel said, because he said them with such certainty that doubting him felt like a personal failing. For most of our marriage, I managed the money. Not because Daniel couldn't. He was sharp. Good with numbers when he wanted to be. But because he called it boring and I didn't mind the structure. I paid the mortgage. I built the credit. My name was first on almost everything, including the credit card that would matter so much later at that gate. Daniel worked in sales for a regional trucking company, the kind of job with a base salary and commission that made some months feel like Christmas and others feel like holding your breath. I taught 8th grade. English at Hartwell. Middle. Steady. Unglamorous. Mine. Somewhere around year 7, Daniel started traveling more for regional accounts. I didn't think much of it. Sales guys travel. That's the job. I packed his bag sometimes, the way you do when a marriage becomes a system of small kindnesses. You no longer notice yourself performing. It was my sister Angela who noticed first. Angela notices things. It's either her greatest gift or her most exhausting quality, depending on the week. She came to visit in March and said, offhand over coffee at my kitchen table, "Does Daniel usually text that much when he's supposedly in meetings?" I said, "He's a salesman, Angie. He's always texting someone." She didn't push it, but she looked at me the way you look at someone, standing near a ledge they don't know is there. The trip was my idea, and I want to be honest about that, because it matters for what came later. I'd been saving, quietly, in a separate account Daniel didn't know about, which in hindsight tells you something about where our marriage actually stood, for a 10th anniversary trip to Portugal, Lisbon, then the coast. I'd read about a cliffside hotel in Sintra with rooms that looked like something out of a fairy tale, all cool stone and green shutters. And I wanted, for once in 9 careful years, to do something extravagant. I booked it in June for a trip in September. 2 round-trip tickets, business class, because I told myself we'd earned it. A week at the hotel, a rental car for the coastal drive, all of it on my card, the one with my name on it, the one I'd built for a decade of on-time payments and careful limits. Daniel seemed happy about it. Almost too happy, if I'm being honest now. He hugged me in the kitchen when I showed him the confirmation email, lifted me half off the ground the way he used to when we were newly married, and said, "You always know how to surprise me, Ren." I didn't know yet that surprise was about to become a 2-way street. Her name was Priya. I want to say that plainly, without cruelty, because this isn't a story about hating a woman I never really knew. It's a story about a marriage that had already ended in every way that mattered. Long before either of us said so out loud, I found out about her the way most people find out about these things. Accidentally, stupidly, through a phone left unlocked on the kitchen counter while Daniel showered. I wasn't looking. I want to believe that matters, though I'm not sure it does. I was reaching for the phone to check the time, and a message preview lit up the screen. Can't wait for September. Tell your wife whatever you need to. 2 weeks, just us. I stood there in my own kitchen holding a stranger's future. I didn't confront him that night. I want to tell you I was strategic, that I planned everything from that first moment, but the truth is messier. That first night, I just sat on the edge of our bed after he fell asleep and stared at the ceiling fan going, around and around, thinking about Sintra, about the Cliffside Hotel, about the 2 tickets sitting in my inbox with both our names on them. It took me 4 days to read all of it. The messages went back 11 months. 11 months of meetings and regional accounts. 11 months of a woman named Priya who worked at a marketing firm 2 states over, who Daniel had met at a conference and apparently never stopped meeting. The trip to Portugal, it turned out, wasn't a coincidence to him. He'd been planning his own September trip with Priya before I ever booked Sintra. When I surprised him with the tickets, he hadn't been happy because of me. He'd been relieved, I think now, because my trip gave him cover. A husband traveling with his wife raises no questions. A husband traveling with his mistress, using the dates his wife already cleared with the school district, raises none either, as long as the wife never finds out there were 2 separate trips, happening under one calendar. I didn't cry that week. I remember being almost calm. The way people describe the eye of a storm. I kept teaching my classes. I kept grading essays about To Kill a Mockingbird, writing good insight in red pen on papers about justice and cowardice, while my own life quietly rearranged itself into something I didn't recognize. What I did do was call the bank, quietly. I didn't cancel anything yet. I just asked questions. I learned things about my own card. I hadn't thought to learn in 10 years of paying it faithfully. What it meant that my name, and only my name, was the primary holder. What it meant that Daniel was listed as an authorized user, not a co-owner. What that distinction could mean, if it ever came to that. I didn't know yet that it would. September came fast, the way dreaded things do. Daniel and I barely spoke that final week, except in the small mechanical language of shared logistics. Did you print the boarding passes? Did you call about the rental car? Don't forget the passport is in the blue folder. I played my part. I don't know even now whether that makes me strong or just very good at hiding. What I hadn't told him was that I'd read every message. What I hadn't told him was that 4 days before our flight, Priya had texted him something that changed everything. I don't want to sneak around anymore. If you're getting on that plane with her, I'm done. Choose. I know this because I still had access to the messages, right up until the morning we left, when he must have finally realized. His phone wasn't as private as he thought and changed the passcode. Too late. I'd already seen enough. I'd already made a decision, too. I just hadn't told anyone yet. Not Angela. Not my mother. Not even myself. Fully. Until we were standing in the airport with the departures board glowing, blue above us and Daniel's hand tight around his own boarding pass like he was gripping something he was afraid of losing. We got to gate 14 40 minutes before boarding. I remember the particular gray of the carpet, the smell of coffee from the kiosk nearby, the announcement echoing overhead about a flight to Chicago that wasn't ours. Daniel had been quiet the whole ride to the airport, scrolling his phone with a tightness in his jaw. I used to mistake for stress about work. He got a text right as we sat down at the gate. I watched his face change. Not dramatically, just a small tightening around the eyes, the look of a man doing arithmetic he doesn't like the answer to. He excused himself to call his mother. He was gone 11 minutes. I know because I counted. When he came back, he didn't sit down. "Renee," he said, and something in the way he said my name told me the next 10 minutes of my life were about to become a memory I'd carry for the rest of it. I can't do this trip. I asked him why, already knowing, needing to hear him say it anyway. "It's complicated," he said. "There's someone, I need to be honest with you. There's someone I've been seeing, and she needs me right now, and He stopped. Started again. "I need to go to her instead. I'm sorry. I should have told you before we got to the airport. I know that, I didn't know how." I sat very still. Somewhere behind him, the gate agent announced pre-boarding for passengers with disabilities and small children. "You're choosing her," I said. Not a question. "It's not about choosing," he said, which is the kind of thing people say when they are in fact choosing. And then, because Daniel was never a man who could leave well enough alone, never a man who understood that some silences should simply be allowed to sit, he reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out his boarding pass, and tore it in half. Slowly, deliberately, like he needed me to watch. Like some part of him wanted me to feel exactly how discarded I was, so there could be no ambiguity later about what this moment had meant. "I'm not getting on that plane," he said, letting the torn halves fall onto the gray carpet between us. "I'm going to her." For one long, suspended second, the entire airport seemed to go quiet. The announcements, the rolling luggage wheels, The low hum of 100 strangers' conversations, all of it dropping away until there was only the sound of that torn paper settling on the floor, and my own heartbeat, and a strange, clean clarity rising up through the wreckage of 9 years. I looked down at the torn boarding pass. Then I looked up at my husband, who was already checking his phone again, already halfway gone to a woman he'd chosen over me in the middle of an airport, without even the decency to have this conversation somewhere private. "Okay," I said. He blinked. I don't think he expected okay. I think he expected tears, or a scene, or pleading. Something that would let him leave feeling like the reluctant one, the conflicted one, the good man caught in an impossible situation. He did not expect calm. "Renee, I really am sorry." I said, "Okay, Daniel." He hesitated, like he wanted permission to feel relieved. And when I didn't give him a reason to stay, he nodded once, picked up his bag, and walked away from gate 14 without looking back. I watched him go until he disappeared around the corner toward the exit, off to wherever Priya was waiting, off to the life he'd apparently decided was worth tearing this one up for. I sat alone at the gate for exactly 4 minutes. Then I took out my phone, opened the banking app, and looked at the screen glowing in my hand. At the hotel reservation in Sintra, the rental car confirmation, the dinner I'd booked at a restaurant overlooking the Atlantic. For our 10th anniversary, all of it charged to a card with only one name on it, mine. I opened the customer service chat and typed 4 words that felt, in that moment, like the first true thing I'd said in 11 months. I need to cancel everything, but not the trip. His card. I didn't cancel the card in anger. I want that understood, because anger is loud in what I felt. Sitting at gate 14 was something quieter and much more dangerous. The calm of a woman who has just stopped, waiting for someone to become who she needed them to be. The customer service representative's name was Denise. I remember that oddly, the way you remember small, kind details from the worst days of your life. Denise asked me to confirm my identity, and then asked which card I wanted to address. "All of them," I said. "I want to remove an authorized user. Effective immediately." "I can absolutely help with that," Denise said, and I heard typing on the other end, brisk and businesslike, and something in her efficiency steadied me. "Can I ask the reason for the change, just for our records?" "He tore up my plane ticket for another woman," I said, "in the middle of an airport 40 minutes ago." There was a pause. Then Denise, in a voice that had clearly seen some things in her years of customer service, said, "Ma'am, I am going to make sure this is done today." By the time I boarded my flight to Lisbon, alone, in the business class seat that should have been Daniel's, 3 of his 4 cards had already been deactivated. The 4th, a smaller store card for a hardware chain, took until we were somewhere over the Atlantic, according to the confirmation emails waiting for me when I landed. I want to tell you I felt triumphant. Mostly I felt tired, in the particular way you feel tired after finally putting down something heavy you'd forgotten you were carrying. Daniel didn't notice for 6 hours. I know this because he called me at 11:47 that night, my time, which meant it was dinner time for him. Still in Hartwell, presumably somewhere with Priya, presumably somewhere that suddenly required a card that no longer worked. I let it ring twice before I answered, because some old habit in me still wanted to seem unbothered, still wanted him to wonder. "Renee, what did you do?" His voice had none of the softness from the airport. This was Daniel cornered, Daniel caught off guard, and I'd learned over 9 years that this version of him was the truest one. The one underneath the charm, the one who showed up when things stopped going his way. "I removed you from my accounts," I said. "You're not on the mortgage as primary anyway, so I'd start thinking about where you're going to live once I file. You can't just—" He stopped himself, and I heard a woman's voice in the background, low and questioning, Priya, asking. I imagined what was wrong, asking why the card had declined at whatever restaurant they'd chosen to celebrate a choice that was already costing more than he'd bargained for. "Renee, we need to talk about this like adults. We're not married anymore, Daniel. Not in any way that matters. You made that decision at gate 14, not me. I'm just the one who's honest about it. So this is revenge." "No," I said, and I meant it, though I understood why it looked that way to him. "This is math. I paid for those cards for 10 years. I built that credit. You get to keep whatever you built with Priya. I get to keep what's mine." He was quiet for a moment. Then, quieter still, almost like the old Daniel, the one from the wedding table years ago. "Is this really how it ends? After 9 years? It ended at the gate, I said. I'm just the one doing the paperwork. I hung up before he could answer. Sintra, it turns out, does not care about broken marriages. The cliffs are just as green whether you arrive as half of a couple or as one whole person, figuring out how to be alone in a beautiful place. I checked into the hotel I'd booked for 2 and found the room ready for 2. A bottle of Vinho Verde, chilling in a bucket with a small card that read, "Congratulations on 10 years. Mr. and Mrs. Wells." Daniel had filled out the anniversary note himself. Weeks earlier, before I knew any of what I know now, back when he still thought he could have both his marriage and his mistress without ever paying for either. I drank the wine alone on the balcony that first night, looking out at a valley of red rooftops and stone towers going, soft and gold in the evening light, and I let myself cry. Not for Daniel exactly, but for the version of the trip I'd imagined. The one where we sat on this balcony together and remembered why we'd started. I understood sitting there that I wasn't only grieving my marriage. I was grieving the story I'd told myself about it. Angela called the next morning. Word travels fast in families, and apparently, Daniel had called their mutual friend, Marcus, in a panic about his frozen accounts, and Marcus had called his wife, and his wife had called Angela, because that is how information moves in a family that loves you. "Tell me everything," Angela said. And I did, the message I'd found. The 11 months Priya's ultimatum text, the torn boarding pass, all of it, laid out plainly the way you lay out evidence, in a case you finally have the strength to argue. When I finished, Angela was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Renee, I need you to hear this. You didn't do anything wrong. You did the one thing you're allowed to do when someone tears up your ticket in front of you. You made sure he understood exactly what he was tearing up." I stayed in Sintra for the full week. I drove the coastal road alone, the one I'd read about, past cliffs that dropped straight into a churning silver ocean, and I stopped at a small restaurant in a town called Cascais where an old man playing guitar in the corner sang something in Portuguese I didn't understand but felt anyway deep in my chest. The way grief and freedom sometimes arrive wearing the same clothes. Daniel texted twice more that week. The first was defensive, a long paragraph about how I'd humiliated him by cutting off the cards while he was trying to figure things out, as though the humiliation of a declined card at dinner could compare to the humiliation of learning, secondhand, through a stranger's phone screen, that your husband had been planning a second life for nearly a year. The second text came 4 days later, and it was different, shorter. I made a mistake, not just with Priya, with how I ended things. I keep thinking about the sound the paper made. I don't think I'll ever stop hearing it. I read that message twice, standing in the hotel lobby with my suitcase already packed for the flight home. Some old part of me, the part that had loved him at that wedding table, that had built a decade with him brick by careful. Brick I'd wanted to feel something soften. And something did, briefly, not enough to change anything. Just enough to remind me I was human, and that endings, even necessary ones, still cost something. I didn't respond. I filed for divorce 11 days after I landed back in Hartwell. My lawyer, a sharp, unsentimental woman named Corinne, told me the 11 months of messages, combined with the timeline of the Portugal trip and the airport incident, which, it turned out, a stranger nearby had partially filmed on their phone, the torn boarding pass, fluttering to the carpet in grainy, vertical video that somehow found its way onto social media within days, captioned by someone who didn't even know us. This man really tore up his own wife's ticket in front of her at the gate, made the settlement conversation considerably shorter than it might otherwise have been. Daniel moved in with Priya within a month. I heard, through the same family grapevine that had once carried his panic, about the frozen cards, that things between them grew, complicated almost immediately, that the urgency which had felt like love in stolen hotel rooms and rushed phone calls didn't translate well into shared rent and grocery lists and the ordinary friction of daily life. I felt no satisfaction hearing this. Only a kind of tired recognition. He had chosen an idea of a woman over the reality of one, and now he was learning, the way people eventually do, that ideas don't do dishes or split bills or stay steady when the excitement wears thin. I kept the house. I kept my name on everything that had always, technically, been mine. I kept teaching To Kill a Mockingbird every fall, and that year, when I wrote good insight in red pen on a student's essay about justice, I meant something different by it than I had the year before. Almost a year later, I went back to Sintra. Alone again, but differently alone. The kind of alone you choose rather than the kind that's handed to you at an airport gate. I sat on the same balcony. No bottle of Vigno Verde with someone else's name misprinted on the card. Just a glass I poured for myself, watching the same valley go gold in the evening light. I thought about the torn boarding pass, the sound it made, the way Angela had put it, that Daniel hadn't just torn up a piece of paper that day. He'd torn up the last excuse either of us had for staying somewhere neither of us truly belonged anymore. Some people say a marriage ends when the love runs out. I don't think that's quite right. I think mine ended the moment I understood that I'd been the only one still building something, while he'd already started tearing it down in secret, month after month, long before he ever reached that gate. He just finally let me watch. Sometimes the cruelest thing a person can do to you turns out to be the clearest gift they ever give you, because once the paper is torn, you finally stop pretending it was ever whole. If this story made you think differently about the things you've been holding on to out of habit instead of love, let me know. I'd love to hear from you.